8, 7.
Guess what?
Hey everyone, today we're taking a look at the Phoenicians.
The Phoenicians.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now you might already know a little about them.
Yeah.
Like, maybe you remember something about them being awesome shipbuilders from history class, or, that they created the alphabet.
Right.
Super important stuff.
Yeah.
But that's kind of just scratching the surface.
Right.
Our source this time makes a pretty bold claim.
Yeah.
That the Phoenicians might have been way more powerful than mainstream history gives them credit for.
Much more influential.
Yeah, and we're going to deep dive into all of that.
Absolutely.
But first, let's just do a real quick recap for anyone who needs a little refresher on who the Phoenicians were.
Sure.
So, what's the textbook version of their story?
Okay, so the Phoenicians were this seafaring people. They were active in the Mediterranean from 1500 BC to 300 BC.
Got it.
Their main city was Byblos. And as you mentioned, they're famous for developing the alphabet.
Huge deal. Can you imagine a world without the alphabet?
Right.
I mean, forget about this deep dive. There would be no books, no writing, no social media.
Yeah.
I mean, it's hard to even picture.
Absolutely.
Because that's kind of the basic story that you learn in school.
Right.
But our source is suggesting that there's a lot more to it.
There's a lot more.
Especially when you start looking at this one really pivotal point in history.
Okay.
Which is the Iron Age and the rise of the Sea Peoples.
Right around 1200 BC.
Yeah.
You've got the Hittite Empire, which was this powerful empire. They had a monopoly on iron production.
So they controlled all the iron.
Yeah, basically.
Yeah.
And then suddenly they get wiped out by these mysterious sea peoples.
Yeah, the Sea Peoples.
Nobody knows exactly who they were,
Right.
where they came from,
Right.
or where they went.
Total mystery.
Yeah, historians have been debating about them for centuries.
And now our source is claiming that these Sea Peoples who took down a whole empire might have actually been the Phoenicians.
The Phoenicians themselves.
Specifically, a group called the Tribe of Asher.
The Tribe of Asher.
Now I know what you're thinking. Who?
Right.
So the Tribe of Asher was one of the 12 tribes of Israel.
Okay.
And their territory was right in the heart of Phoenicia.
Oh, wow.
Super close to major ports like Tyre and Sidon.
I see.
So it's not completely out there to think that they might have been involved.
Right.
And here's where things get really interesting.
Okay.
Iron, back then, was everything.
Essential for warfare.
Exactly. Whoever controlled the iron had a huge military advantage.
Absolutely.
So if the Phoenicians, disguised as the Sea Peoples, took down the Hittites and got control of the iron,
It changes everything.
it's like a total power
A
move.
huge power move.
And it also lines up pretty neatly with the timing of the Israelite conquest of Canaan,
Oh, wow.
right? So you've got the Phoenicians potentially taking out the Hittites, the Israelites moving into Canaan.
Yeah.
It all starts to fit together.
It's all connected.
And there's even more evidence to support this idea. The Egyptians had names for some of these Sea Peoples groups.
Oh.
Names like Wesh, Ash, Dan, Yen, and Shur Dan.
Interesting.
And those names sound kind of familiar, don't they?
They do.
Like they could be connected to the Israelite tribes of Asher and Dan. It's almost too much of a coincidence to ignore.
Right.
So now we've got this potential link between the Phoenicians, the Sea Peoples, the control of iron, and the Israelites.
Yeah.
And it all points to the Phoenicians maybe being a lot more powerful than we've been led to believe. But then the question becomes, why would someone try to cover up their influence?
Yeah, why?
What could be the motivation for downplaying their role in history?
That's a good question.
Maybe their influence was so widespread.
So pervasive.
Yeah, that acknowledging their true power would totally rewrite our understanding of ancient history.
Yeah, it would challenge the whole narrative.
Totally.
Everything we thought we knew would be called into question.
Exactly. So if the Phoenicians were potentially behind the downfall of the Hittite Empire, what happened next?
Well, that's where things get even more interesting.
Okay, I'm ready.
After the Hittites, another empire popped up in their place. Lydia.
Lydia.
Yeah, and our source claims that Lydia might have actually been controlled by the Phoenicians too?
Wait, so they might have taken down the Hittites and then taken their place through Lydia.
That's the theory.
That's some serious next level strategizing.
right.
But what makes them think that?
Well, if you look at the lineage of some of the key figures in Lydia,
Okay.
like Niobe and Amphion,
Uh-huh.
you find connections to Thebes in Greece and even to Heracles.
Heracles.
Yeah, like the legendary Greek hero.
Wow. So these figures, who we usually think of as being purely Greek,
Right.
might have actually had Phoenician roots.
That's what the evidence suggests.
It's like uncovering a secret family tree.
It is.
And it hints at this whole web of Phoenician influence that extends way beyond what we've been taught.
Exactly.
So we've got the Hittites, Lydia,
Yeah.
and the plot thickens even more when we get to the rise of Persia.
Persia.
The Persian Empire.
No, that's a whole other story.
It is. And we're going to dive into all of that right after the break, so stay tuned.
Persia. Persia, this huge empire that just seemed to come out of nowhere.
Right. Conquering everything in sight.
But our source is suggesting that maybe the Phoenicians were the real power behind the throne.
Like they were controlling Persia from the shadows.
Exactly.
Okay, I'm listening.
So on the surface, it looks like Persia just conquered Phoenicia along with a bunch of other places.
Right.
But what if it wasn't a conquest at all?
What do you mean?
What if it was more like a partnership?
Like a strategic alliance.
Or even the Phoenicians using Persia as like a front for their own ambitions.
Whoa. So the Persians were just the face of the empire.
And the Phoenicians were calling the shots behind the scenes.
That is wild. But is there any evidence to back that up?
Yeah, actually, if you look at the line of Persian kings,
Okay.
after Cyrus the Great, things get really murky.
Murky how?
Well, you've got Cambyses, then Bardia, then Darius, and there's all this mystery and intrigue surrounding how they came to power.
Like someone was manipulating things to make sure their guy got the crown.
Exactly. Interesting. And get this, some of the Persian queens.
The queens.
Yeah, like Hassandain and Fadim, they might have actually been Phoenician.
So these powerful women married to the kings of Persia could have been Phoenician the whole time.
It's possible.
Wow, that would give them a lot of influence.
They could have been shaping Persian policy, directing military campaigns.
Maybe even orchestrating those conquests we were just talking about.
Exactly. It's like a real-life Game of Thrones.
Ancient stock.
With the Phoenicians playing the long game.
I love it. Okay, so we've got these potentially Phoenician queens in the Persian court.
Yeah.
But how does that explain Persia's meteoric rise to power?
Well, imagine this. What if those conquests weren't driven by Persian ambition?
But by a Phoenician master plan.
To expand their own sphere of influence.
So the Persians were like the muscle.
The face of the empire.
And the Phoenicians were the brains.
Providing the strategy, the resources, the know-how.
To make Persia a global superpower.
Precisely.
That makes a lot of sense, actually.
Right. It fits with what we know about the Phoenicians.
Their skills in trade navigation, shipbuilding, diplomacy.
They were master networkers.
Like they were born to play this game.
It's like they were playing a giant game of Risk.
Using Persia as their pawn to dominate the world.
Exactly.
But if they were so powerful, why haven't we heard more about this?
Right. Why is their influence seemingly erased from history?
That's the million-dollar question.
And it leads us to another really interesting part of this theory.
Okay, what's that?
The role of ancient historians.
Historians.
Yeah, what if the very people who were supposed to tell us about the past were actually part of the cover-up?
Wait, are you saying that historians like Herodotus and Plutarch
Yeah.
might have been biased?
Or even influenced by the Phoenicians to downplay their role?
That's a pretty bold claim.
It is, but it's worth considering.
Okay, I'm open to it.
Like, take Herodotus, for example.
Okay.
He was from Halicarnassus, which had really strong ties to Phoenicia.
Right.
And he traveled all over the Persian Empire, collecting stories and information.
Yeah.
So it's possible that his accounts were shaped by his interactions with Phoenician elites.
So it's like a historical game of telephone.
Where the Phoenicians are whispering in everyone's ear.
Making sure their version of events gets passed down.
Exactly. And it reminds us that history is never really objective.
It's written by the winners.
Or by the people who control the narrative.
Wow, this is heavy stuff.
It is.
So let's recap.
Okay.
We've got potentially Phoenician queens influencing Persian kings. A hidden Phoenician hand guiding Persia's conquests.
Yeah.
And ancient historians maybe downplaying their role.
It's all connected.
It's like a giant historical puzzle.
And we're just starting to put the pieces together.
And the puzzle gets even more complex when we get to Alexander the Great and the Greco-Persian War.
Oh, yeah. Alexander.
Yeah. So were his conquests really his own? Or was he another pawn in the Phoenician game?
That's what we're going to explore next.
I can't wait. All right, so we're back. And we've been talking about this potential hidden influence of the Phoenicians.
Yeah.
And how they might have been manipulating events behind the scenes for centuries.
Right.
We've seen how they might have been involved in the downfall of the Hittites, rise of Persia.
Yeah.
And now we get to Alexander the Great.
Look at
This guy's like a legend, right?
A military genius.
But now we have to wonder, was he really in control?
That's the question.
Or was he just playing a part in this grand Phoenician scheme?
It's possible.
I mean, think about it. We've already established that the Phoenicians might have had a lot of power in both Persia and Egypt.
Yeah.
What if Alexander's conquests were actually about solidifying Phoenician control over those regions?
Instead of actually conquering them.
Yeah, like maybe he wasn't facing real resistance
Maybe it was all staged.
to make him look even more impressive.
And to make his victory seem inevitable.
Right. And our source points out that during the siege of Tyre, Alexander actually got help from a Phoenician fleet.
A Phoenician fleet helping him.
Yeah, which is weird, right?
Very weird.
Why would they help someone who's supposedly invading their homeland?
Unless they were in on it.
Exactly.
Ah.
Maybe they were using Alexander to further their own goals.
To secure their own power.
It's like a historical magic trick.
Illusion of conquest.
While they're pulling all the strings behind the curtains.
Controlling everything.
And then there's the whole thing about Darius leaving behind all that treasure for Alexander.
Oh yeah, the treasure.
Like mountains of gold and silver.
It's almost too much to believe.
Right. What if that was actually a strategic transfer of wealth?
Orchestrated by the Phoenicians.
To fund Alexander's campaigns and keep the money flowing their way.
It's like a giant money laundering scheme.
Ancient style.
But on a massive scale.
Okay, so what about Alexander's death?
His death.
He died pretty young, right?
Number 2.
And it was all very mysterious.
Nobody knows for sure what happened.
Some people think he was poisoned.
Yeah, poisoned.
Well, what if that was part of the plan too?
You mean like...
Like, what if he faked his own death? Went into hiding after he'd served his purpose?
It would explain why things get so confusing after he's gone.
Right. Like the historical record goes dark.
The Phoenicians covering their tracks.
So are we saying that everything we thought we knew about Alexander the Great is wrong?
It's a possibility.
That the whole story was fabricated by the Phoenicians?
We can't say for sure.
But it's definitely something to think about.
It challenges us to question everything we thought we knew.
And to look for alternative explanations. To be skeptical.
Exactly.
Because the truth might be a lot more complicated than we realize.
And a lot more interesting.
So there you have it, folks.
The Phoenicians.
Maybe not just skilled traders and shipbuilders.
Maybe master manipulators.
Shaping the course of history from the shadows.
For centuries.
It's a theory that might sound crazy at first.
But when you start to connect the dots...
It's hard to ignore.
And it makes you wonder what other secrets are still hidden in the past.
What other stories are waiting to be uncovered?
That's the beauty of history.
It's always evolving as we learn more.
Always changing. And as we ask new questions.
So keep those minds open.
Keep exploring.
And never stop questioning the official narrative.
Because the truth is out there.
That's all the time we have. We'll see you next time for another adventure into the fascinating world of history.